Good morning. Welcome to our next installment of the Divine Feminine series. And every month, Cassandra and I have come on. We have talked about a different divine feminine. And we started with some biblical characters that are from the Judeo-Christian um, in lineage of uh, women like Deborah, Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene. And we've moved through some others, Kuan Yin, Nut. We've touched on different pantheons. And today we're going to come back to Greece. We're going to talk about Hestia. And
Yeah.
I think if you aren't familiar with Hestia, it's because she's probably not somebody like you've heard of Aphrodite or you've heard of some of, Demeter. But Hestia is one of the original 12 Olympians. And so I'm just going to give you a little background on her. And she's probably, arguably, maybe the most powerful of them all. And if you don't know kind of the backstory, and this happens in a lot of creation and deity stories, is there's the creation of children, and then those children intermarry and have more children. So her parents were
Kronos and Ray.
Cronus, Cronus, right? Was her
Kronos and
father,
Ray.
and Ray. And Cronus ate his children, and then they rebirthed out. So she was the first, but then she was the last. She's the oldest,
Yes.
but she was the last. She's the oldest child, but the last that came out anyway. So just to kind of put you in perspective, if you've heard of some of these characters, her siblings are Zeus, Poseidon. This is like these are like the big guns, right? But she went to Zeus, and some of her brothers wanted to marry her. I know that may sound odd, but this is very common in a lot of storylines. She went to Zeus and said, I pledged to be a virgin forever." And he's like, "We're going to honor that." And even at one point, when he showed up on the scene, she said, "I'm going to give Dionysus my place as one of the, 12 Olympians." And so that's kind of just a basic introduction to Hestia and kind of to give you a little bit of her backstory. And I'll let Cassandra add more in. Cassandra, what would you like to add about maybe her origin story or anything else you want to share? Because I have a lot to share about her.
I also have a lot to share about her too, because this was actually classical mythology was one of the things that I kind of focused on in college too. So I got really excited when we kind of came back to the Greek pantheon because it's like you said, she was one of the original, and this is just I'm not sure if you can actually see it. It's hard to see. Maybe I'll just post something at another point, but it basically shows that she was born from Kronos and Ray as you said as the first. But Kronos, there's a reason why he wanted to eat all of his children. He took over for his father, Uranos. So Uranos comes from we call them the primeval origins, which is chaos, Gaia, Tartaros, and Eros. Eros is like the form of love the divine love that we kind of aim for, that pure primeval love that we associate with, Aphrodite sometimes, but Aphrodite was more so desire. So Hestia was the firstborn from Kronos. And because Kronos had this story of that eventually one of his own children would take his place, he decided that he was going to eat all of his children. So he ate Hestia first, Demeter came second, Hera came third, Hades fourth, Poseidon fifth, and then Zeus was born. But Ray, their mother, had been sitting there watching all of her children be eaten as they were coming out. And so her solution was to disguise a large rock as a baby. And Kronos ate the rock thinking that he was eating Zeus. Zeus was hidden in the earth while all of this was happening and ended up regurgitating all of these children back out because he had swallowed a rock instead of his own child. So because he did this in reverse order, Poseidon came out, Hades, Hera, Demeter, and then Hestia. And to the story of how she kind of retained her virginity. Virginity in Greek myth was not actually just about sexual purity, it was more so about independence. So, and after she came back out and they kind of, the Olympian gods took over. Apollo and Poseidon wanted Hestia. They wanted to marry her. They were vying for her hand. They were courting her. And a lot of these stories, by the way, the ones I'm taking them from come from the Homeric hymns. So this talks about how the gods were created, but the original story comes from Hesiod, the Works and Days, and Theogony. Theogony actually talks about exactly how all of the children were born and how all of the gods and goddesses and all of the spirits were born. And there's actually only one mention of Hestia in the Theogony in the original story, and it just talks about her being born first and then her being regurgitated. So what we do find comes from the Homeric hymns, and our biggest story is actually Aphrodite's hymn. So Aphrodite's hymn is what talks about Poseidon and Apollo vying for Hestia's love, and Hestia goes, I don't think so. I would actually rather be independent. So she went to Zeus. There's a couple of phrases in here. She talks about Kronos of the crooked counsels beget her first. Poseidon and Apollo courted this mighty goddess, but she took the choicest boon, and instead she put her hand on Zeus's head and she said, I want to be alone. And he's like, okay, you know what? In place of you being belonging to someone else, I'll give you the middle of the house. I'll give you the hearth, the center of every single home, which is what we talk about her being the potentially the most powerful goddess. Not, she wasn't mentioned as often as the other gods and goddesses, mostly because she didn't have the drama surrounding her. But because she decided to take a step back, and she was like, listen, I want to maintain my independence. Zeus was like, okay, you know what? You're smart enough that I'm going to make sure that you are the center of every single house and home and political forum. Because the hearth was also, I mean, we see, the Olympics starts with the hearth. It starts with that fire. That fire was carried throughout different homes and different political forums to maintain this sense of community. So her being the first and last as a child also translated into the home too. Anytime an offering was made to another god, they first made an offering to Hestia. And they first made an offering to her, and then their closing ceremony was made to her as well. So she was almost like a tax collector in a way of like, just because they're going to get, some kind of offering, that also means I'm going to get one too. So she maintained her independence. This virgin goddess, actually, she was not unfinished or waiting to be completed by someone else. She was whole as she was. So that was kind of what the virginity meant in that time for that particular goddess. His response, Zeus's response to a woman that doesn't want to be tied to another man, is basically to make her the center of the home. That's what made her the most powerful goddess, was that she not only took her tithes before and after every other god and goddesses, but she was also every single day honored in every single way. Every time they warmed themselves up in their home, they were paying tribute to Hestia. So her origin story was somewhat different, but her love story just centered around how she wanted to be independent and whole within herself. So she was the wholest goddess because she was the one that chose not to attach herself to something else. So in a way, she was what we consider like the mother, the maiden, and the crone all in one. So her being the oldest, her having the crone wisdom that we talk about, her being the virgin also makes her the maiden. But her being center to every single home and every single hearth, everything that gives us nourishment, she becomes the mother too. And it's like you said, even that hearth, new cities were started with continued fire from the central hearth of the parent city. So anytime they expanded, they would take the original fire, that original Hestia, and they would take it to another city and plant it there. So she spread through fire. And that's why there's not a lot of images of Hestia, because Hestia was the fire. She was, and the hearth wasn't necessarily something built in every home. It was carried. So every time, it didn't have to be put in one spot. You could carry it with you. So in a way, you could take your home with you everywhere you went. You could take your wholeness everywhere you went. She was stability, peace, community, communication. So not just when you had family over, you gather around the hearth to talk. That community was driven by Hestia. So she was also, in the Roman sense, even more important. So we have our Greek pantheon that comes first, and then the Romans kind of adapt a bunch of it, right? And so Vestia is born in the Roman panthology. So she actually created this cult was created around her that people were chosen before their puberty and they were enrolled in Vestia's college. They served 30 years of service, but afterwards they were legally independent. So women in Roman times that served under Vestia became legally independent and had the ability to pardon people. So even if someone was on their way to being executed, a Vestia student could essentially pardon them and they could be on their way. Julius Caesar was actually pardoned by a Vestia student after the Solus Civil War. So fun random fact. Julius Caesar attributed part of his life to Vestia too. So she maintained importance in Greek mythology and then again in Roman mythology by maintaining that center fire. And one of the things that I really loved about learning more about Hestia, because again, this was exciting to me to go back to, but being reminded that just because she wasn't mentioned in every single story didn't mean that she wasn't the most important, because it's almost like us forgetting that matter exists, but we use matter every single time we touch something. So her importance lied in the fact that she was everywhere, not just in the stories that you hear or the stories that were written down. And one there are two myths that I wanted. The first one being that she wasn't powerful because she was so passive in a way in some of these stories. But the second myth is that she never actually gave up her seat to Dionysus. That is a modern myth that's been told to kind of fill like where she went, but she's still part of the original 12, the original
Hmm.
six pantheon. So she never actually gave up her seat. That was just one of those myths that kind of got adapted along the way to try to explain her absence from Olympia, but she didn't leave. It was one of those where we fill in the gaps or we hope to find out what the story actually is. But the story was that she just was in the home. She was in every single person's fire instead. And I'll leave that all that information with the poem because we always use our goddess oracle. And the poem about Hestia says, "I am what its core, the indescribable, the elusive, the living presence that inhabits and transforms. A building, a dwelling, an edifice, taking it from the realm of marble, stone, or wood, and with its hearth fire lit, making it a home." And to me, I just see that Hestia can make a home anywhere she goes. So, and so can we. So, what do you have to add, Deb?
Well, I think you covered so much of that so well, but there's so many deeper dives we can take into some of these things. So
Absolutely.
again, I said like Aphrodite is a very, Demeter, some of these other Hera, we've heard of these characters a little more, and especially they had their own temples that you would go to worship them. And Hestia is so far, far different because each city had its central flame and fire, and that was her space and place. Within every home, they had their fire. And so that was her place. So it's not that you had to go to an edifice, a temple to go worship her. It was in your daily life, in your home. And if they ventured out to colonize or break out into a new city, they carried that flame to take with them. So I want you to think about um, how she was worshipped on that daily basis. That literally they would start their day and thank her for that flame because fire was everything, right? Fire was how you were going to prepare your food. Fire was how you were going to keep warm when it was cold. Fire meant so much to them. And for that flame to go out would be such a huge thing for them. So there's not like elaborate festivals and all these things. And she's not in the stories because she was not drama. She was not entangled in war. She was not seeking power. She knew her worth. She didn't need it to be tied to a man. She's like, listen, I'm not getting married. This is not what I'm going to do. And so she was a no drama single gal, like, I got this, I know who I am. And then she became the most powerful because of this space and place she held in their society. So um there's no place or space you had to be. She was there within your home. She was there in your everyday life. So um her fire was the goddess that she was. Her fire was the warmth, was the center. So think about, before every meal, they prayed to her and thanked her, right? Before worshiping anybody else, they thanked her first, like you said. At every gathering, before any journey, before any significant decision, they honored her. If a baby was born, they first presented the child at the hearth of their home near the fire and presented that baby and gave thanks to her. So, I mean, think of how many times, maybe they weren't eating 3 meals a day back then, maybe they were, but for they were definitely eating in the morning and the evening. So twice a day at meals, excuse me, they were honoring her in their cooking, in their eating, in their sharing. So, what a great space to see that she was just in an everyday part of life, and how special that was to those that worshiped her and honored her and thanked her. And when you asked her to bless you and you thanked her, that was just not something they took lightly. It was, again, woven into their everyday life. And I think she by far was worshiped more than anybody else in that way.
Hmm.
But yet you don't go on a tour to Greece and see some big temple to her. It doesn't
Right.
exist. It was in the home. She was the center of it all, the center of family. So she means so much in that way of family, even though she herself never married, right? And but she did have a family in every family. So what
Hmm.
a great way to that she presided over every meal. She presided over every important thing. She just was, it's almost like, there's a big moment in somebody's life, a graduation, whatever, and you have that great aunt or grandma that's always there. Like, she's that person, she's that family member present at every single thing. And so I think her energy, like the things I want to focus on that I took away, is fire. Fire is energy. Fire is action. Fire, not wild or destructive, but like completely contained. Fire that is steady. Fire that is life-giving. And being a central figure in every home, like she's just in the middle of that access of everyone. The threshold of their home, like entering into their home as they passed in, they were thanking her because she was like their protector of their home. So she governed every sacred space within their
Hmm.
world. And in some traditions, her flame was part of that breath of life. And so just thinking of the our breath, and when I'm stressed and I need to pause, I need to just self-center and take a deep breath and just kind of calm down. I think like she is that calming force, right? She is that. She wasn't warmongering. She was this calm presence. And so I think of a calming breath could be very much tied to her. And I think you don't have to be loud. You don't have to
Right.
be, you can be this very um kind of off the radar person, and yet but be so integral and important. So she's the goddess that goes inward while all the others were going outward. And I think she calls us to look inward. I think she calls us to care for ourselves. And I think there's a piece of her that wants you to take ownership of who you are outside of your relationship to anybody else. And I think there's a piece of her that's asking us to to center our life about our purpose, not center our life around anything outside of ourselves, but be centered into what is important to you. And and my life might look vastly different from your life because what's important to us is going to vary. So knowing your story, knowing your truth, and living in that and looking inward and centrally, I think is a beautiful message from her. And so I think now, like when we light a candle and it also provides the light, because we live in a
Mhm.
world where we flip on a light switch and we have a light, right? But fire was their source of light. And so I think of that too when the steady fire by the hearth was also that lit the oil lamp to take to the next room to carry the light. So she carried her light was carried everywhere they went within the home. And where do you carry your light in this world? And where do you want your light to carry and move through the world? I think that's a really beautiful message as well to us. So, I think sometimes we feel like I live this very mundane, ordinary life. And what importance do I have? And maybe you have moments of self-doubt. Maybe you have moments of like doubting your worth and what impact I make. And you do not have to be solving, the climate crisis. You don't have to be, you know, curing people of diseases and things. Like simple everyday living and tasks and showing acts of kindness, being a light to others, holding space for others can be so important. And she's not, like I said, this rivaled uh, person that had all these temples because it was just within the home. And maybe some gods wouldn't have liked that space and place. They wanted to sit on thrones and they wanted to sit on Olympus and they wanted to feel important. But I think we can truly look at the story of her today and see, wow, she was extremely important. And yes, shine your light and authentic joy. And so, at a time when women had very little public power, she, the Romans, when they kind of integrated, right? Because you think about Neptune was Poseidon, they integrated the Greek and had their own names for them. So this Vestia and these women who served her then became these completely independent women. She really was this example of independence. And if women sought marriage and a family, that wasn't a terrible thing, but Hestia was going to be there to stand beside you. But if you wanted independence, you looked to her and you were like, you're the roadmap. I see how you operate, right? And so I think she's just beautifully woven into this story of my life. I can see where my path is mine and I will live my path true to me, whatever that is. And I want you to live your life and your path true to you. And she did that. She did that from the moment she told Zeus, I don't want to marry. She did that in a very powerful way for us to say, I can live my true path in a time when women had very little voice, very little power. And I think she also gives us strength to see that as women, we're all women here, we are the caretakers. We are the caretakers of the home, of the community, of each other. And whether you parent and raise children or you don't, you still have an important role in the community. You still have an important role in what you do around others, children that may be family members or children that you interact with in your community. And we can all be and carry the importance of who we are and the ripples we make out in our community. And I think that essentially she really said domestic life is divine life. And
Mhm.
how many times is domestic life, everyday living, not honored? And how in a patriarchal society has domestic life become a way to serve the patriarchy? And so I want to flip that script and take Hestia as this beautiful goddess of like domestic life is an honor. Domestic life is divine work. domestic life and everyday living is what we're here to do. And just this really genuine elevating that space that I really feel like the patriarchy has kind of been like, how can we use it? How can we use it to our benefit? How can we take and and just consume it and use it to our good? And we just have to take that power back and take that divineness back and be like, the domestic things that we do are beautiful and divine work. And doing something domestically is no less sacred than doing anything else in this world. And it's actually probably the most sacred work that is done, and how we live in community with one another, how we treat one another, how we hold space for one another. And as women, we do that really, really well. We do that really well. And so I think we need to take that and really run with it. That's really, truly the message I get from Hestia. The work we do is divine, and we are not the lesser. In fact, we are the creators. We are the heart of the home. We are all those things. And it is divine work that we do. Divine. So I'm here to continue that divine work. I'm here to create safe spaces. I'm here to create warmth by the fire. I am here to create a sense of belonging and community. And someday when and we bring the balance, absolutely. There's a lot of balance that we need to bring, let me tell you. But um, I just feel so so emboldened by her to when I say in my morning intentions, you are divine, a divine creation, like I will never now say that again without thinking of Hestia, because she's really there to tell you you are divine. Because I think so many of us are like, okay, Debbie, whatever, I'm divine, but she's really here to push that narrative for you. She's that example to us. Like, she's no lesser than Zeus, Poseidon, Demeter, Aphrodite. She's, and yet she's greater than all of them in my mind because of the importance and role that she played. And you are no less as important in the role that you play in your life, in your community, in this world. Any thoughts, any questions, anything you want to add, Cassandra?
Oh, I want to add to exactly what you've been saying, just and the importance of the home. I can't remember who it was that said it, but if you want to change the world, start by making your bed, kind of thing. The core of our home being what leads us to change the world, and taking care of that home slash hearth. But I also understand that not everyone feels that they have a home, even where they stay, even where they lay their head. So one of the things that I took from Hestia was that we can be whole without a home that we might call our own just yet. That we can find wholeness and our homeness within ourselves too. So the meditation that Goddess Oracle deck puts forth is about finding wholeness within your toes, within your knees, within like reconnecting and coming home to yourself first so that you can then create a home for others. So it's also about finding home within ourselves and being comfortable and independent within ourselves so that and these vestal virgins that we talk about that weren't associated with somebody or tied to somebody, like the reason they weren't is because they were whole on their own, and then they could spread whatever else they wanted to. So going from what you're saying, I think it's so important to just be reminded. We've covered so many different gods and goddesses that had power, that had outward power, that went through battle even, and this is the one that didn't have all these extravagant stories because her power comes from like that fire that we have within ourselves, which is in every single person. So it's like you said, she's more powerful because it's everywhere. She and her power is everywhere. And I mean, what we can find within ourselves is incredibly powerful, even if it's just making sure that our dishes are clean before we go to bed, even if it's just making sure that like we've set up an area for ourselves that make us feel good. Like that's powerful in and of itself because it might set us up for something even greater the next day. I mean, so it comes, and when you talk about thinking of her and us being divine creation, as I'm washing my dishes earlier today, that's what I was thinking of. As I was doing my laundry, I was thinking, okay, this is setting me up, and this has power in itself. Like we forget just how important all those small pieces are, but they're integral. I mean, we can't climb mountains without taking one step at a time. So all of the
Absolutely.
little home things are part of our little steps that we take for ourselves. So that's just
I love
what's been
it.
crossing my mind.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm going to leave you with this one closing piece, right? She is asking us to take in this radical act of belonging to ourselves, this genuine place of fullness within ourselves. We are not lacking anything. We are full. We are complete. We are divine. And not not a single thing you do is is too small. Not a single thing you do is too mundane, too little. Like every small act has an important place and role. So, um, think about how she was offered partnership and she's like, I am whole on my own. And being whole on her own, that is beautiful. So wholeness is key, right? Rooted in who she is, shining her light bright. So here's my final question I'm going to leave with you all before we pull the card for who will be our next goddess that we're going to talk about. What is the flame that you have been neglecting or dimming within yourself?
That's good.
What have you neglected or dimmed your light? Where have you not honored fully and sacredly who you are? What would it look like to finally tend to that flame and really let it shine? And so I want to leave you with that thought and integrate that for yourself throughout, the next month. Really think about that. And again, I may bring her up in my morning intentions when I talk about being a divine creation because I will never say that again without thinking because she really is like your life, you bears importance. Every single one of you is a divine creation and it is sacred work that we do. Okay. I loved this conversation today. This was good. Cassandra, can you pull the card to tell us who will be our
Sure.
next um, divine feminine that we'll talk about in the month of July?
And I believe it's July 19th
Yes,
is what we're
July
doing.
19th.
Ooh. All right. So we've got, oh, the changing woman cycles. Changing
Oh,
woman. So I'll have to send you, I think she comes from a native tribe
okay.
for so with a long name that I probably can't pronounce. But I know that it has to do with the cycles of our feminine cycles and moving through the different cycles of life. So that's going to be
Perfect.
our next goddess.
You know what's so interesting? I saw a social media post and somebody was asking a gentleman in his 80s, what's his advice for a successful marriage? And he said, let me tell you, I've been married to the same woman, but I've actually been married to about 8 different women because throughout her life, there's a new chapter and there's a new version of her that emerges, and I fall in love with this new person every time. And that is us. We are ever evolving, ever changing, and it happens so physically in our body. And where men's bodies are kind of operating the same from puberty on, we're vastly different. And so I'm interested. Yeah, text me that information so I we can
I
work on that
will.
together. And thank you all for being here. If you've enjoyed this, we do this every month. We record these. I post them on my YouTube. So if you want to go back and look at Kuan Yin or Nut or Durga or Deborah or Mother Mary, we have recorded these conversations. There's always something that we can take and learn. And I have enjoyed this series so much. So July 19th, it will be the next time we get together and do this. Cassandra, thank you as always. Thank you everyone for being here and participating. Does anybody have any questions before we jump off? Are we all good? All right. Thank you all for being here. Have a
Thank you
wonderful day,
all.
guys. Bye.
Have great days on purpose.
Yes.